Hi, everyone. Jason here for the semi-weekly Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast. Excited to see you all. My guest this week is sommelier Clay Reynolds, who has been a somm in San Francisco for a long time. I first met him there more than a decade ago. And is, in addition to his restaurant work, also now the key person working with the San Francisco 49ers Appellation 49 program. So I'm excited to talk to him about that. Niners are doing well, of course. But first, while everybody joins, I wanted to give you a quick tour of what's going on here at the Vineyard. As you probably know, we are 2 weeks out from our big rainstorm. The water was flowing over the road. It was gushing out of the vineyard. We had to close for 4 days because of erosion to the roads. The vineyard itself was in great shape. But I took a trip down to Tablas Creek today, the actual creek. This is what it looks like. Far from a rushing torrent, it is this kind of quiet, bucolic. I leapt over it in a couple of places. My dog waded through without getting more than her bottom legs wet. So it is much calmer now. That said, there's still water everywhere. This is a section of the vineyard where there's a spring that just popped up, and it's flowing through one of our Mourvedre blocks. So there is a ton of water still in the ground. It is soaking down to deeper layers. It is ridiculously green out there. A couple pictures. Here's a picture of Jewel Ridge, which is this high up, head-trained, dry-farmed block at the southern edge of the property. Here is a trellised block that we call Nepple Flat. You can see how lush that grass is. We are getting the sheep out into the vineyard. They're up in one of our Grenache blocks at the moment, looking happy to be out there. The Mastiffs are looking equally happy to be out there with them. It's a pretty beautiful time of year if you haven't spent time in Paso. That said, there are still some evidence of some of the issues with the rain. This is a section right at the very edge of the vineyard down, right at the border with Las Tablas Creek. You can see how fast the water must have been flowing to carve that out and get down to the limestone underneath. So this is like literally the only place I was able to find a picture of erosion in the vineyard. It held up exceptionally well. In addition to what's going on out in the field, it is bottling week for us. We're bottling our rosés and our Vermentino. I'm super excited for both of those. We've been really scarce on really everything but kind of age-worthy reds over the last couple months. So if you've been waiting, we're going to release the Patalan Rosé and the Vermentino right away in our tasting room. The Dianthus is going out to Wine Club members in March. And then one last thing to show you, because it's something I'm excited about. One of my sustainability goals this year was to cut down on the bottles that we're using for things that don't really need to be in bottle. And I can't think of anything that needs less to be in bottle than the samples that we're pouring in our tasting room. So we have calculated how much we used in samples in our tasting room last year and purchased enough kegs and a keg system so that we will be dispensing all of our tasting room samples, or not all of our samples, but all the samples of the current releases out of keg. And we figure that'll save us something like 10,000 bottles from being opened and used. I mean, there are certainly good reasons to use bottles for wines that you're going to cellar for a while, but for something that never has to leave the winery, that we're going to be pouring for people in the first, 9 months after it is created, it just seems pointless. So I'm excited about this. And next time you come to the tasting room, at least the newly, I guess bottled isn't the right stuff, the newly made wines will be served to you out of keg. So this is the first batch showing those three. That's Patalan Rosé and Dianthus and Vermentino kegs. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to invite Clay to join me. There I see him in the Uccello Lounge. That will work. We did a test yesterday and it went super smoothly.
Hey, Jason,
Hey,
how
Clay.
are you?
Hey.
I am good. I'm doing
great. How are
well.
you?
Thank you. It's a beautiful day. And thank you
Here
for
too.
your efforts with the. I just logged on and saw you talking about the kegs for your tasting room, and everything helps, man. You know, it's cool.
I mean, we've been doing kegs for like a dozen years out for the marketplace. So we sell something like a quarter to in some vintages as much as a third of our Patalenda Tablas in
Right.
those
Right.
whatever 19.5 liter reusable stainless steel kegs, and it makes a ton of sense for the restaurants and wine bars that have tap systems in place. But we didn't think
Right.
that we should be doing that here also, because it requires a little bit of extra infrastructure, but it was
Right.
one of the things that when we thought
Right.
about it last year,
How do
just seemed
you?
to make so much sense.
Not to go off on a tangent, but are you? I've always had trouble with reds out of keg. Whites and rosés, I think, perform beautifully. But do you put much red in keg? Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We do. We've done the
Yeah.
Patalan Red and Keg for now a dozen years, and we've done small batches of Grenache in Keg the last couple of years. It's honestly not that different from what you have to do to bottle it under screw cap. It's a little less forgiving than bottling it under cork, where like if you have a little bit of reductive character, you have a little bit too much sulfur, basically a cork will absorb that over time and the wine comes into balance. Um, you don't have that luxury in screw cap, but you also don't have that luxury in
Right.
keg. It's kind of got to go in as you want it to come out. So you have to be careful about things like dissolved
Right. Right.
oxygen and sulfur levels. And but we've had, I mean, we really haven't had any issues after the first, second vintage of Patalan Red, which was the
Yeah.
2011, which is kind of a reductive vintage anyway. Uh, and we had the same issues in screw cap
Right.
in the bottles as we did in the kegs, and we got better at measuring dissolved oxygen and haven't had any issues in the
That's
last
great.
decade.
I should revisit. I mean, admittedly, I probably, I remember struggling them with when all the kegs first came to market. Initially, the reds were just a little more challenging and a little didn't quite perform as well. I mean, I'm judging always from the customer reaction, and it was constant
Right.
reorders of the white. Give me another glass. Give me another glass. And the reds, people would try it and then they'd kind of move on. So I'm sure it has come a long way, as have all the changes in the gases that are being used and everything. So
Yeah, and I think in the early years of everybody experimenting in kegs, there were a lot of people who were just doing it themselves by hand at their winery,
sure,
and I think there was a learning curve. I mean, we saw it too. So yeah, I'd say it's worth revisiting.
right
See if you still think the
on,
same thing's
right
true. I
on.
think it's probably going to be better. Okay, awesome. Well, we jumped in the middle. I usually like to start by basically just asking my guests, like, what was your path into wine? Was wine something that you were interested in growing up? Was it on your family table for dinners as you were growing up, or was it something you came to later?
Well, that is a great question. I came to wine later in life, although it was present. So I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and my father actually was in the whiskey business there. So bourbon was on the table when I was growing up. But the distillery that he worked for was also an importer, and they imported a bunch of stuff back. This was back in the late 70s or the 80s and early 90s. And they also actually got into wine. They were primarily a spirits business, primarily a whiskey distiller, but they got into wine a little bit. So it was around, but it wasn't something that was a big, that there was a focus on. And I can remember, when I had two sort of formative experiences. I did a semester in London when I was in college, and I kind of made it a personal mission or challenge to get into wine when I was in Europe, because I thought that I should. It turns out I just needed to get into the pubs, but I started drinking more wine when I was living over there, and I stayed an extra 6 months and went around Europe, and so I got a little bit of exposure. But it wasn't until out of college I graduated with a finance degree, believe it or not, and I was working in corporate finance in Louisville, and I hated it. I just couldn't stand that work, and I left the company that I was with, and I was in between. I didn't know what I was doing, so I started working at a restaurant, and I got hired at this really one of the best restaurants, the most revered restaurants in the state at the time, and I had no business working there. Right? I mean, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about wine. I didn't know anything about food, frankly. But the owner, this woman who was amazing and taught me a lot, she liked me for whatever reason. She gave me a chance, and so I went and I started working, and I was kind of, out of fear of being shamed, I just started studying everything, because I didn't want to look like an idiot. And this was kind of pre-internet. I'm dating myself, but this was, I was getting books and magazines and trying to just read as much as I could. I started to really fall for the whole thing, the whole scene, the wine, the food, the hospitality industry, everything. And I never forget, one night I was there, and a guy came into the restaurant, and he was by himself, and he sat down and he ordered it was a Behringer Private Reserve. I don't remember the vintage. I'm guessing this was probably 98, maybe 97. So it could have been an early 90s. We didn't have a huge cellar at this place. So whatever it was, he ordered it. And at the time it was, $150 or whatever it was on the menu, which was a lot. I mean, it might have been the most expensive bottle on the list. Yeah. And he sat there and he just was in heaven. And he just drank the bottle by himself, and he kept looking at it and smelling. I mean, he just had this unbelievable singular experience with this bottle that it just blew me away. At the time, it was like, first of all, that it would hold him that, it was that captivating for him that he didn't change focus practically the whole dinner. The fact that he would spend that amount of money on that bottle of wine for himself, because prior to that, I assumed you just bought expensive wine to show off to your guests, right? And the guy, it was just amazing. And I just was like, I need to understand what's going on here. I just really never forgot that, and from that point forward, as I was studying the whole restaurant world, I really started to focus on wine and really started to just take in as much as I could possibly take in. At that point, it didn't take me long to kind of exhaust the resources in Louisville, Kentucky. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of great restaurants. So shortly thereafter, I moved early in 2000, the next year-ish, I moved out here to San Francisco. Because I wanted to get to a place that had more stuff going on in the wine and spirits and restaurant world, and I never left.
So, did you have a wine of your own that was kind of like a formative wine that you tasted and were like, oh, wow?
I have had many. There were, there were, right when I landed here, I started working at a restaurant, and we had a tasting group, and there was a big wine emphasis. It's not around anymore. It was called the Cypress Club. It was downtown, and a guy brought in a 61 Latour, and that was pretty like, holy mackerel. This is, I had an experience with wine, like I mentioned, and it started to really taste and appreciate. But that was one of the first times that I really started to at least understand that this beverage, which is what it is, can go to levels that are, at risk of sounding a little hokey, that are, just like transformative. Like they can really, it can far surpass just being a beverage. It can really be an experience. it can really be something that is more than just something delicious. It can be a thing. And yeah, I was lucky enough to have a lot of those experiences. I worked at a bunch of places in the city that were wine centric. And then I ended up at a fancy French place downtown for a number of years. Started as a waiter and ended up running that place. It was called Fleur de Lis. And yeah, and yeah. So I got a lot of exposure there. That was cool. That was really neat because there were a lot of wines. Probably at that time, I mean, certainly Michael Minna had opened at the hotel down in Union Square. So I would say that probably us, them, maybe Danko, and maybe La Folie. Those were the places that all the wines would be. I mean, anything, all kinds of crazy stuff was getting popped and tried, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah, it must have been a pretty exciting era in San Francisco.
It was, man. And it was amazing. And it was, and it's also, it's unfortunate too, I think, because a lot of the wine world has been priced out of that. I mean, I fear that there's going to be a whole generation of somms and a whole generation of wine enthusiasts that are never going to get to taste, say, a 61 Latour or any of the first growths from those amazing vintages, or, some of the Grand Cru Burgundies as well that are kind of, untouchable at this point. And it's kind of a shame. I can remember, my buddies and I, we would work weekend shifts, and we would put a little dough aside, and on Monday, we'd go to the wine house or some, where they had stuff that was discounted, and we'd buy a bottle of Lafite. I mean, it wouldn't be the 82 vintage, it would be off vintages, but still you could get it. And we would go home and order a pizza and drink the Lafite. And that's just not a thing anymore, which is kind of a bummer. But, on the flip side, there's more great wine, I think, available than ever before.
Right. That was actually what I was gonna ask next. Is it seems like as those traditionally great regions, I'm thinking Bordeaux and a lot of Burgundy and maybe Barolo, and some of the regions that maybe would have been go-tos a generation ago if people are like, what is great wine? I mean, now there's so many new places doing so much interesting stuff that's sort of available at our fingertips in a way that's never.
And I think that's a great thing. I think, while I might lament the passing of these great experiences, I also think it's amazing that there's so much stuff available, and wine lists now have a lot more to offer, and maybe it sort of mystify. I don't know. I think there's people that feel that some of those regions maybe are intimidating, and if they see other things, they can get into it. And yeah, I think it's a great time in wine right now. I think, there's also wine in places, that it wasn't before, i.e. like what, I'm involved with the 49ers. And, it's now like the cool thing is not only do you get exposure to to wine and to great wines at great restaurants, you're able to get exposure to wines at lots of places.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to dive into that in a second. Before I do, though, I wanted to ask, sort of, with this shift, obviously, in availability, but also in prices of different regions, has your philosophy about how to put together a great wine list changed in the last, in a way that can be kind of encapsulated over the last, decade or so?
I mean, I think so. I think definitely it has. I think that you feel, I feel a little less pressure to, check certain boxes that I used to feel like were obligatory, when putting a list together or a set of offerings together, or certainly a by the glass program together. I, w- I will say that I I have also made an effort with so much wine being available to try to put wines and utilize wines from people that I know and people that are good and that are doing it the right way. I think the individuals behind the wines have become more important for me, and that is a result of there being so much, you know. So I think that's kind of a good thing. And yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think so. I think that's primarily the way that it's evolved for me. I mean, it used to be that if you wanted, you just got what you could get, and now you just have a lot more to choose from. So the stories behind it, the people behind it, are really a lot more important to me nowadays. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. That's true. I think there's been something of a societal shift along those lines too, in that I think all of us are probably more aware of the sources of the things that we purchase, or the actions outside of just the storefront of the businesses that we patronize. I mean, I think we're all more conscious of that than
Yeah,
we were
totally.
10,
And
20 years ago.
I also, I mean, at the same time, like, I don't need to go into. I want the wines to stand on their own when I present them on a list. I don't want to feel like I need to talk somebody into a wine based on some story about somebody doing something. But authenticity is important to me, and the people behind the scenes and what they're doing is important to me. And we have the luxury now of being able to be a little more selective, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, let's dive into the 49ers thing, because I think it's super cool. How did you get connected with them in the first place?
I was involved with so my current business partner, Loretta Keller, had a restaurant south of Market called Bizou way back in the day.
Yeah.
And she, in the early 2000s, was contemplating a rebranding of that restaurant and was unsure of what to do. And I had, at that point, had just left that Fleur de Lis, and a mutual friend put us together, and we rebranded and reconnoitered things, and we opened Coco 500 down there, and it was right on 4th and Brandon, so it was close to the off ramp there, by the ballpark and everything, and John York, Dr. York, who was running the team and the owner of the team, is a big food fanatic, and he loves all things food and wine, and so he would look and see what was going on in the city, and when they played and when they were at Candlestick, he would come in, and we were lucky that we got a little bit of press, and we were right off the expressway there, and so he became a customer of ours, and he would much rather talk about food and wine than everybody else comes up and wants to know what's the story with the quarterback and how, blah, blah, blah. And he would come in and I would just start talking about, Pinot and what's happening with the food. And we just hit it off. And so we started doing some things for them, for the foundation, some catering and some events. And long story short is when the stadium, the new stadium, Levi's Stadium, started to be imagined, and they were dreaming up what to do. Dr. York, who has been a huge supporter and champion of California wine. I mean, he loves all wine, but he knows how special things are around here and how good we have it. He wanted to promote California vintners and California wine in his stadium. So he wanted to do something special, something cool. And he wanted to have a wine program unlike anything else in the NFL. But at the time, and this was, so Levi's is about 10 years old now, I think, or 9 years old. And they started figuring it out way before that. So at the time, like a lot of people that are coming to wine in California, especially, he was a Napa cab guy, you know, and he said, "Look, I need help. I need somebody that can help me, expose me. We can figure out the rest of." He's like, "I got that down. I can figure out the rest of the state and what's going on." And so we started working together on this thing, and the result has been this program that we have there, where we invite vintners to come, as you know, to games and pour for the fans that are in certain areas of the stadium, and then we populate the lists that are available for purchase around the stadium in different clubs or whatever with these wines. And so it's great, and it's worked out very well. At first, it was one of these things where people didn't. I mean, you went to a ball game and you were lucky. First of all, you were lucky if there was wine available, right? It's beer and popcorn, and then if there was wine, it was you don't even want. Well, I don't know. Not
right.
Not good. So
we're not of any.
When we first put this into place, it was a little bit like it took a little time to get some traction. People didn't expect it; they weren't seeking it out. But as it has evolved, and as people, I mean, the demographics have changed. Of people, sports is not just isolated to the sports fan. People are going to games because it's an event, and stadiums are bigger and more beautiful, and the everything that surrounds games and all these things, so it's just changed a lot. And so people have really embraced it. They're stoked when they go down and they see, oh my God, I can get whatever, I can get this wine, I can get that wine. A lot of the stuff we're able to get, I mean, people tend to call me back when I say I'm with the 49ers. So we can get some stuff, we got some allocated bottles, we got some stuff with some bottle age on it. And so it's been great.
It's really such a cool program to be a part of. I mean, we were invited back in the Candlestick Park days to go and pour wine in the owner's box a couple of times. And it was clear even at that time that the York family was, I mean, this was not a marketing consideration. This was a genuine interest in wine in general, and wanting to connect the interesting people who they have at that kind of level with the wines and wineries.
I mean, that was the jumping off point, was the stuff. So John would invite vintners to his box to pour for his guests and for the family's guests at Candlestick. And when Levi started to be designed, he wanted to try to replicate that experience for fans and for more people than just his guests. And so that was where we started. And yeah, you were part of that from the very beginning. And it was cool, man. It was like, people were like, what? You're doing what? And now it's like, we got people calling us, and some other stadiums are looking at what we're doing, and it's cool.
Yeah, that was actually a question that I was wondering about. Is there anybody else in the NFL that's doing anything similar? Because it feels so inherent and appropriate for a San Francisco-based franchise to be focusing on wine in this way.
I mean, certainly, luckily for all of us, the wine programs in general at a lot of these new facilities and new stadiums, both in the NFL and certainly like at Chase Center for the Warriors, and there's more stuff available because people are looking for it. But in terms of this particular program, where we're connecting the vintners and the fans and allowing them to meet you guys and taste and get a feel for what's going on out in the state and out just in all parts of California. It's still pretty singular. It's very unique It's very unique. I mean, granted, we got the proximity on our side, right? We can call you guys and say, "Come on up," and it's not like a huge lift for you to come to Santa Clara. But you would think that some other folks would maybe pick up on it and certainly try to do something similar. But I don't think so at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up
Yeah.
in New England. I grew up in Vermont. I got a huge kick a couple of years ago when I was there working with our Massachusetts distributor of getting taken to Fenway Park and to do a presentation of the wines for the top level of the club suites as they're putting together a more interesting wine program. But even that, it's like, okay, great, you have your wine on the list. The Appellation 49 program, it's different because you're physically there, and they're essentially the club is making introductions between wineries and its best customers, which is a super cool thing. It's sort of
Totally.
like it's all of the.
It's driven by the owner. It's driven by Dr. York. I mean, it's one thing for whether it be the food service provider or somebody that works for a team or for a facility to say we want to offer cool stuff. It's another thing for the guy that owns the place to say, I want this experience for my fans. I want my fans to have something super cool and super special. And, you guys figure out how to do that. It's got to be driven by somebody in that position. And so, I know that there are a lot of other owners that are into wine because when they visit the stadium, the York family gives them a little gift, like a welcome gift, and it's wine, and I usually deliver it. And so some of them are like, yeah, great, get out of here, games. But some of them are like, oh, and then they'll talk to me for 5 minutes about what I just brought them or what, do you have any other stuff or blah, blah, blah. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something maybe come along. And I hope that it does for everybody's sake, because it's a pretty cool opportunity to be able to meet you guys and have it be in that setting. And it's casual, but people can engage with you and try different things. And like, we usually have 6 vintners per game. So you get to see a nice little sampling, but it's not like you're going to some grand expo and you're just like overwhelmed. So it's cool.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Can you talk quickly? I know we're close to the end of the half hour. Can you talk quickly about I mean, you're joining us from the Uccello Lounge handle. Talk about what you're working on there.
So Loretta and I, we started a project with it's really been amazing. We started a project with the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, which is a private music school in the city, and they just built a new facility on Van Ness Avenue, right across the street from Symphony Hall, and it is primarily housing for the students. To date, they had not had a central building or facility to house the music student. They had some different places they had contracted with and some dorms and here and there, but not a centralized place. And so they finally were able to bring that to fruition and build this unbelievable place that has not just the housing, but has a performance hall on the top that overlooks City Hall and state-of-the-art recording studios and all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that they realized when they finally were going to bring all the kids together into one place was that they needed to feed them. So they asked us, some connections, some friends. They asked us if we would be interested in doing a food program for the school. It's not a huge school. It's like 450 kids, I believe, or students, I should say. And about 250 live on campus. So at first we said, no, thank you. We're good. We're fine. That doesn't sound like. And then the more we got into it and met the people involved, we really started to get excited about it. And then they said, we'd also like to put a restaurant into the facility on the first floor that we can use to, showcase this place and, just add to the vibrancy of kind of that Hayes Valley corridor and the arts district and all this stuff. And then also, as we got to meet these people and like being surrounded by these students playing music and practicing, it's pretty inspiring. So we're like, yeah, we're in. And so we opened the facility with them. We opened it during COVID, not the restaurant, but the program for the students. And we were feeding the kids in the building, and then we opened Uccello Lounge about 6-7 months ago. Again, it's right on Van Ness, and we're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights right now. We're going to expand very soon to 5 nights. And the real cool part is we have live music performed by these students at night. And they are unbelievable. They're unbelievable. And, there's a lot of good food in the city. There's a lot of good places to get a glass of wine or get a cocktail or a whiskey or whatever, but there's no place where you can go and hear these guys and kind of, maybe you're going to see the next big thing, maybe, and one night we have a jazz quartet, the next night we have a string trio. It's really cool. Yeah, it is. It's been amazing. A lot of fun.
Super cool. Okay. Well, we ran a little bit long, but hopefully not too much.
Yeah,
but it's been a pleasure. It's fun to, I think we first met when you were at Coco 500. And like I sort of seen the progression since then, but it's cool to hear how that came about. And I love the little inside glimpse into how that Appalachian 49 program came together. Cause I really do think it's something that's
I appreciate you having me on, man. I enjoyed it very much. All right. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, Clay. Everybody else, all the other Tablas folks, I'll be back in 2 weeks. My guest then is going to be Michael Dorf, who is the founder of City Winery. We'll get to talk sort of food and wine and music again in a different way. So join me in a couple of weeks. Meanwhile, I hope you're having a good beginning to the year. And if you feel like coming out here, it's hard to imagine a nicer